All right, everyone. Well, we are going to get started here. Very excited to have you here at Yardstik, and we're going to be talking about how to build a workforce risk program for 2026. 2026, if for all of you who are part of it like we are in the human race, there's a lot of things going on. It's a fun time to be alive, but it's an interesting time to be managing a high volume workforce. And so we're going to jump into that today. It is not the same as 2022 anymore. It's a new age, and we're excited to talk through the challenges of today that many of you attending are facing, but what you can do about it. There is technology, there are plans, there are things that you can execute on to make hiring and reduce workforce risk in your workforce. So before we get into it, I want to introduce, I'll start with myself on the right. I'm Brady. I lead our customer teams here at Yardstick. Absolutely love working with our customers and future customers every day. We'll talk about this a little bit today. It's just been a moving target here in the hiring world, and we at Yardstick get to play a part of that. So very excited, and then very honored to be joined by Karen, who's our VP of product at Yardstick. And while I get to do the cool thing of talking with our customers and future customers, Karen's building it. Karen and team are building it. So it's been really incredible partnering with her over the last few years and chasing this moving target and having a ton of fun doing it. So Karen, thanks for joining us today. Excited to tackle this with you. All right. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk through why 2026 is different. The world has changed, and so we're going to address that. It's easy, to start a workforce trust program, put it into place, and maybe not revisit it for a while. What we're here to do today is not overwhelm you with all of the different things that you can do, but hopefully to help you see some options that you have to continue to increase trust in a fragmented world, fragmented workforce. We're going to talk through what a modern program looks like. And then, like I said, we are going to take some Q&A. And so if you have those burning questions and things that you're dealing with in your world, I think one of the things that Karen and I hear every day is if you have the question, probably dozens, if not hundreds of others in your role have that exact same question. And so this is a chance to phone a friend and submit something into Q&A, and I bet somebody else has the same question. So excited to dig in here. And here's where we're going to start. 2026 is different. It's changed from 2022. The world has been used to running a one-time, point-in-time background check on the data that we get, and I just don't think that's the way the world works anymore. And Karen, we've been able to sit at the forefront of that and watch it happen and get to do things about that. I would love your perspective on 2026. What's going on? Why are we having this conversation? What's happening in the landscape? And maybe contrast that to 2022. We were building this thing together 4 years ago, and now what's it look like for people who are building workforces and doing high volume hiring?
Absolutely. When I think about 2026, my question is what isn't different in 2026? I think where we're sitting in June of 2026 is entirely different than where we were in January. Even I think, how many times do we say the word AI or the initials AI or see it or use it on a daily basis? I think that's probably one of the key things that is really changing everything about background checks and just trust and risk in a workforce. So I think, as you've already said, 2022 feels like about a decade ago. Where we are sitting today is an entirely different landscape. So we just want to talk about some of the things we're seeing today, and what we're seeing a lot of our customers and the prospects that the team is talking to, what we're hearing from them, and then how that is manifesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's dive right into it here. We're going to talk through a few different forces at play. Force one, I think that's changed is your workforce really is always new. Freelance has hit the gig markets, staffing growing like crazy. The market, there's just so much more attrition these days. There's high turnover, and so this one point in time check just really isn't enough anymore to manage a modern workforce and to understand risk. And so that's a big changing force at play here. And we see many of our customers really in these workforces with high attrition, high turnover. This is where they really need to know, who do we have on the field right now? Who is representing our brand? who is with our people and our customers, who is touching our funds. Like these are very important questions, and all things that are risk, really brand and people and assets. They're at the center of risk, and in this changing, highly transient workforce, it's a harder question than before. We're not necessarily sitting across from the person through three interviews every time and then watching them get placed. And so I'm going to keep moving through these different forces, and then we're going to hit on trends, and that's really where I'll ask Karen to kind of tackle some of these and how we're looking at them. But again, force one, a lot of turnover and a moving target workforce. Force number two is day one really tells you nothing about day 90. If you've done any hiring, I think we have a lot of people who are in HR and operations. I mean, how much do you even really know day one? You're just trying to answer that. That was hard enough. But what you get on day one, whether you're checking for history on somebody, whether you're checking for references, what have you, it's a moving target. It's different than day 90. And so it's good to do your due diligence before day one, but things change over time. This person's now in your workforce acting on behalf of your business. There's a few examples here down below from offenses to fraud. There's just a moving target. Force number three, fraud, fraud, fraud. Karen called it. You hate to use the AI letters too much, but it's just the reality. It made it cheaper. It made it easier. I don't know if you've seen or had a chance to look at deep fakes. If you're one of our customers who's in operations or who's in HR, you've probably seen a resume or a picture or something, and you're like, there's something that's just not quite right about that. But even for myself, having seen tons of these, with the rise of better technologies, AI has just made it very easy to make a convincing fake. It's cheap, and so fraud is on the rise. You can see these stats. 1 in 6 remote applicants show a sign of fraud. 1 in 4 profiles will be fake by 2028. These are not insignificant stats. And then you see over on the left a 1,300% year over year jump in deepfake fraud attempts. So as technology has made this easier, fraud is on the rise. And so we're now no longer solving for, does this person have criminal history? We're just asking such a bigger question here. And so now here's what we get to do is dive into, well, what can we do about it? Because what I just did was lay down the groundwork for, oh boy, this is overwhelming. What's really exciting and inspiring for us at Yardstick is working with the leaders who I know are sitting and listening on this call, whether you're in HR, in operations, you're in product, and you are responsible for making sure that your products and your workforces and your people are safe, that there's trust built into the fabric of these. So it's really inspiring watching people do this because whether the technologies were ready or not, we have just watched people work so hard and diligently to maintain trust and a high bar in their workforce. But now, in the same way that technologies are available to fraudsters and AIs on the rise, hey, we have some technology available to ourselves as well in this moving world. And so we just walked through kind of the forces at play. Let's look at some trends that we're seeing companies deploy. Trend one, introducing identity fraud prevention. This is one that's super, super near and dear to me. When I first came into the background check business, Karen, I don't know if you felt this way. I thought a background check answered the question, are you who you say you are? And I got a few months into Yardstick, and I was like, oh my goodness, you can pass with fake data. This is a little scary. People are doing this at a high rate all the time, and the world has continued to change since 2022, 2023. So Karen, I'd love to hear from you when it comes to identity fraud prevention, identity verification specifically. What's the change you're seeing over the last few years in how companies are deploying this, maybe their readiness to deploy it? Would just love to hear your commentary on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also just want to add one thing to what you were just saying too. If you just think about like how many times has your own personally identifiable information or PII been involved in a data breach?
Mm,
Probably too many to count at this point in time. And, unlike the credit space where there are notices you can get if someone's using your data to try to open a bank account or open a credit card, that doesn't exist in the background check space. Your data can be used in a background check and you have no idea. So to your point, there are a lot of people trying to get through with fake data, and they will use data until they know it will pass a background check and then use that quite a bit. Identity verification, to go back to that kind of question, yeah, we have seen it evolve a lot since 2023 when we launched identity verification. I think on both sides of the coin, for lack of a better word, I think what users are doing in terms of the quality of the fakes and the information and the spoofing of IPs and all of that has really continued to evolve. And then on the flip side, the technology to keep up with that has also drastically evolved. And so I think just seeing, I think for a long time, businesses or organizations might have looked at identity verification as causing too much friction. But I think we're all just used to it. I mean, how many times do we have to, do some type of an IDV or an MFA or, whatever that might be? We're just used to it from a technology standpoint. So I think one of the big changes is a willingness with businesses and organizations to roll this out. Us at Yardstik, we've seen our identity verification volume increase 60% in Q1 from Q4. So I think, just seeing a lot of organizations go, yeah, you know what? This is something that I can put even earlier in my flow to help identify potential bad actors trying to get in.
Yeah, that's really good. That's one thing that we want as we go through this is to not have you get obsessed with the 100 things you could do, but maybe pick one. And I think this one is important. A few years ago, as we were talking to a lot of customers, like you just said, Karen, it costs too much to put identity verification in because it costs me conversion, it costs me time and support. And we are seeing that tone change to it costs me too much not to
Not
do
to do it.
identity verification, which is an interesting tone change for a different set of reasons. I can't afford to have a team like manually trying to do these things. I can't afford to miss one of these. I can't afford this to slip through the cracks and still maintain the bar of trust that I want to in my organization. So the affordance to do it versus not has been quite the change. And I think if you're sitting out there on the fence, just know your peers are starting to do this. And that's not a pressure thing. It's just there is an acceptance of it and people are doing this in the market. So there's trend number one. I think that's important. Trend two is introducing post-hire risk workflows. And we talked about this a little bit on the forces at play that in background screening and hiring, for the most part, we don't know much after day one. There are many organizations out there, and that's okay if this is you today, who don't do anything for years after moment one, and you just don't know what the risk is involved in that. And so you cared about it day one, and you probably should continue to care about it. And do you even have awareness or know how to protect your organization? I think is the question on these things. So important, tough questions, and it's a changing world. I'm curious, Karen, as you think about post-hire risk, I think this is a hard one for people. It's time, it's budget, it's all of these things. It's that risk cost trade-off. I'm curious what changes that you're seeing in the world are leading people to, we're seeing a change in people implementing post-hire workflows. What is it that you're seeing that's helping people take that leap?
Yeah, actually, there's a number of things we're seeing, and there's an adage that I always love that just talks about how, the second you buy a new car and you drive it off the lot, it has lost value. A background check is kind of similar in a lot of respects. Like we've already said, what happens day one if you don't have insight into that afterwards? You're missing a lot of things there. You don't give up on your car, or the second you drive it off, you continue to nurture it and try to keep that value up. And I think a lot of it is similar here. I think a few things that we are really seeing happen, again, on kind of both sides of the coin. From the worker standpoint, there are bad apples and they get into your workforce and they might not do something right away. They might say, take some time, but it can happen. And when it happens within your workforce, unfortunately, that's typically something that plays out in the news or it plays out in social media. There's a really big risk there to businesses, to their reputation, to their customer base, because you're putting your own customers at risk if you're not really, continuing to understand your workforce. So I think, just the evolution of how everything plays out in today's world is one of the things that has really changed. I think, too, just a recognition that everyone's risks and everyone's risk tolerance risks are different.
Mm.
Again, there's just no one size fits all when you think about how you want to handle workplace risk. And so, having multiple ways to do that and think about it. So sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit there. But I think, that is also just a really key piece. And I think another part is a lot of times businesses have known they've needed to do something here, whether that's insurance is requiring it, or maybe their own customer contracts are requiring it. Whatever that case may be, there is a lot of, you've known you needed to do it, but how you start or how you do it has always been a big question. So making this a lot more accessible for
Mhm.
people is something that is really happening, or that we, especially at Yardstik, are trying to make sure is happening. We want to make this as accessible as possible for businesses and organizations. And again, back to kind of what we were saying, your risk tolerances, if you think about your workforce, if you have a lot of drivers, what is that risk if your driver is driving with a suspended license? Or, if you have an employee that got arrested on day 20, maybe if they're an office worker, okay, that's not as big of a deal. Maybe if they're a volunteer coach and they just got addressed, that is a really big deal. So, ways to know what is happening with your workforce is just we are seeing a lot of businesses say, I need to know. No, I
Mhm.
need to be able to take action on this.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you touched on it here. There's also a few ways to do it. I think um, an easy takeaway on some of this stuff is, well, yeah, if budgets were unlimited and time was unlimited, we'd all do identity verification, we'd all do continuous monitoring, but every organization has different risk levels, different risk tolerances. An organization where you're interacting with youth, like you said, Karen, versus where you're maybe driving goods, like they are different. There's different risk tolerances. And so there is a continuous monitoring capability if you need to have always on active insights. There's also the ability to just do scheduled rescreening. Maybe it's every 6 to 12 months. Maybe it's every 2 to 3 years, actually. Some governances require that of you. To be able to do that easily is really important. And maybe that's right for you. Or even built into your workflow. This is actually one we've been seeing a lot of people do is they'll take certain moments and then they will trigger that screen. And it's kind of a smarter way to do it. I really like how people are doing it, where instead of saying, oh, I'll take all 5,000 active people and I'll rescreen them all, that works great. But it's a little bit of a hammer sees nail approach. Whereas if you go more of this triggered event, hey, this person hasn't picked up a job for 2 years and now they picked up another job. We should probably go recheck them. So there's like a smarter, more efficient way to do it as well. And we have customers who are doing this. This is what we're proud to be part of. The gamut of GoPuff, who's completely monitoring their entire active fleet. That's great to know as a customer of that business, whether it's ShareTown, who's rescreening on a regular cadence, very important, or if it's iViewIt, who's got us connected into their technology. And this is kind of that example of when I pull a certain job or when I go to take a certain activity, I can trigger that rescreen at that point. So a lot of flavors to do it. And there is technology today that makes this not so challenging, which is the good news. But again, more than one way to do it. And then number three, fighting fire with fire. Here's this trend. We talked about this. There's technology that makes AI fraud a lot easier. Hey, there's technology that makes catching it easier, which is the good news. Karen, I'd love for you to share a little bit about this because we've talked about identity verification. I think most people on this call would say, yep, heard of it, know what it is. So we've talked about monitoring and rescreening. Yep, know what it is. I think there's like a changing world though of fraud technology that you actually probably couldn't even manually scan for or understand. But it's pretty cool that there's kind of another layer to this to help protect your business from bad actors and from malintent. And we've seen this a lot in our workflows and in our hiring platforms who work with us. So Karen, would love to hear you share a little bit about what's this next layer of technology, maybe of malintent, but also of technology that can fight this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a key takeaway is there really is no singular way to spot fraud. Like there are many different ways it can happen, many different signals for how it is manifesting. So you really do need multiple prongs when you are trying to say, hey, is something going on here? Some of the things that we are doing, seeing, building, working through at Yardstik, there's that magical two-letter acronym again of AI. Using what is the data we are seeing across within a customer's universe? What is that looking like? What are signals we're seeing there? And then eventually being able to actually surface that to them early. On the IDV side, we have touched on it a little bit in terms of how just the quality of fakes and the technology that's being used has greatly improved. We have a partner persona that we work with for identity verification, and I spend quite a bit of time in our persona instance really looking at things, and how everything has changed over the past year is really pretty amazing. Like it is not just about an identity or an ID document and a selfie anymore. Those are pretty easy to do, whether deep fakes or, even just, I mean, if I was a teenager, I would absolutely love the ability to have some of these fake IDs now that look much better than my day and age. But it goes beyond that. You really are looking at signals from the session. When the person is giving you that identity, what do you know about where they're located? What do you know about what they're doing on their computer? It goes so far beyond just that ID and that selfie. So really embracing that technology as it continues to grow and say, how do we then implement that on our side to make sure we are trying to stay ahead of it? Beyond identity verification, some of those, when you get into, again, someone's PII, their social security number, their address even, emails being changed frequently, you can look at some of those PII signals and really be able to spot fraud or to be able to spot trends. It could be the IP that someone is on, the location of their device. If you hire predominantly in the United States and you're seeing a number of devices that are outside the United States, that can be a pretty big risk signal as well. And for some of our customers where the candidates or the applicants actually pay for their background check, we're seeing a number of signals within the payment side of things as well, too. Again, using cards that are based outside of the United States or an IP that's outside the United States. So it's all of these signals really kind of come together. And you use that and you use the modern technology, and that really has kind of led Yardstik to where we're going in terms of human trust platform and how we're viewing what the future needs to look like.
Yeah, that's excellent, Karen. I think that's exactly what you're kind of leading into here. Again, I don't want to speak on behalf of customers and people who are listening to this, but it is easy. I've sat on the other side of talks like this and thought, well, how am I going to do anything about all of this? You're now talking about 4 to 10 different types of technology. It's a lot. And okay, now I have to go procure all those, set up all those, integrate those, implement them. And then what happens when they're actually disconnected? In the end, you actually have set up a bunch of point solutions and still there are gaps. And so if you like look at the gaps between the time someone originally goes to apply, they're giving you their data and their resume, to the time the background screen happens, to the time that you verify credentials, all of the data in the session that Karen talked about, monitoring your workforce. These are all different gaps. And one thing that we have come to learn and appreciate, maybe not in a good way, about fraudsters is they love to shoot the gaps. They can find them. And so there's a lot of people out there who have set up great tech stacks. But again, there is the ability to have these things connected and talking with each other is just incredibly important. And so building a stack like that is just incredibly important. Hey, Karen, quick question. Did my screen stop sharing, or you
Nope,
can
I
you
can
still
see
see
it.
it?
Yep.
Great. Okay.
Yep.
And so this ability to connect these and all of the data together and actually take some action in different parts of the life cycle is just incredibly important. The world is changing. We have one customer who I think just represents the North Star of doing this at live ops, where they have multiple points in time connecting the data together, helping understand the full picture. They have a just a very intelligent, sharp team who's working on these things. It takes time, but if you have the right partners and the right systems, you can pull it off. I'd love, Karen, from you maybe to share a little bit about your firsthand view of live ops. And again, everybody, like you don't have to get all the way here, but I do think it's a good picture of where you can go and what kind of the gold standard can look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So LiveOps has actually joined us on some webinars in the past just to talk about what they're doing and they are seeing. But I would completely second what you said. They have done a fantastic job in really implementing pieces all the way around that flywheel, and being very focused on that interconnectivity. They have very sophisticated fraud and very sophisticated fraud rings just based on the nature of their business. Completely remote business, placing into a BPO, placing into other organizations. It is super important that they are finding any kind of potential fraud and getting it out of their system. That when you think of a modern risk program and all of the different points in time where you might have an interaction with your applicant or your workforce, from the very early part of the hiring funnel to when you actually are onboarding them, to before you give them production credentials, to 6 months in, are they still the same person that you think it is? Before you pay them, the information that is being given to actually pay a contractor, is that information also consistent? If someone is trying to change their credentials to a system, is there an account takeover happening there? Or, got through with some information. Now the person who actually is using it is now trying to change information to their own to get paid. There are so many points in time where we think about a modern program and your workforce risk, so many points in time where something can happen. So to have eyes on all of them, like you said, it can be challenging, but you don't have to have it all at once. You can, and this is, I think, also where LiveOps has been great, in terms of what they had in place even before coming to Yardstik and starting with identity verification and putting identity verification ahead of a background check. So that if someone doesn't even pass identity verification, you're not background checking them. All of these steps over time have really helped to make a dent in terms of that workforce risk. Again, fraud isn't one size fits all. There's nothing that's going to stop 100% of it, but to continue to learn. Another thing that we do regularly with LiveOps is really review the types of people who are going through identity verification and what are the characteristics we're seeing. How do we tweak their workflow in there to make sure that we are now trying to stop as the tactics continue to evolve. So LiveOps is a great example of someone who really is embracing how to think about that flywheel and how to just continuously add to it over time.
Yeah, that's great. And this reminds me, we just got a couple of awesome questions related to this that I think will be very relevant. So if you have some Q&A, feel free to submit. We're almost getting to that point where we'll tackle some of these. But like a great question that I'll tease out is someone just said, "Great, I see all of this. How do I get buy-in from leadership?" So we'll tackle that a little bit, but I think that's the right question to ask. And so a couple more things that we'll talk through are updating your risk program since everything has changed. I think this really hits on the question that I just asked. Okay, the world is changing. Not everyone sees it. If you're on this call, you probably have a front row seat to it. And so you're passionate about it and you care about it. And if budgets were unlimited and time was unlimited, everyone would go get to just build that gold star. And I think what we're here today is to say it's not about getting all the way there. It's about taking a step in the journey, and that can look a little different for everyone. So I think the first thing that you can do, and Karen and I work with, and we work with our customers on this all the time, which is where is the biggest area of risk? For you, it might be fraud. It might be, wow, we're hiring remotely, we're placing remotely, we have no visibility into who these people are before they hit the job site. That's a huge risk to us. That might be a risk. For some of you on the call, maybe you sit across from every single person that you're hiring and you don't think about fraud so much in that way. Maybe it's really that ongoing risk and well, what is that person's risk to the business a year from now or 2 years from now? If they're on the road, what's their risk to us and the likelihood for that risk profile to change? And so I think the question that organizations can really be asking themselves is, and if you're a leader in trust and safety and operations and HR, is what is the area of risk that we're vulnerable to? I think that's all a job that we can really take pride in. It's like we want to protect our businesses. We want to do our best work out there. We want to protect the people that we interact with every day. And so instead of trying to come away with this and think, oh, I got to go do all of this stuff, I think it's just like pick one area where you're seeing some risk and that you perhaps really want to dive into. Um, so Karen, would love to hear a couple of your takeaways after you think through it. It was fun preparing for this. I would love to hear kind of your takeaways as you look at the landscape, what you're building, what's going through your mind.
Yeah. I think one of the key takeaways is probably don't ask yourself, do we have fraud? You probably do. You probably have some level of bad actors. It is, what are we doing to try to spot it? So I think which ties directly into what you were saying, Brady. And even on the flip of that, maybe you just want to say from a trust standpoint, what is it that you want to portray as a business in terms of how you are enabling trust, for your customers, and maybe that goes back to kind of, again, that rescreen analogy of, being able to tell a customer or a prospect, you know what, we rescreen all of our own employees every X often just to make sure, everyone is who we say we are, current with credentials or whatever that case may be. So I think there, might be two sides of that, the trust side and the risk side, but they play together in the same way. I think the other takeaway is just around the technology. It is changing so rapidly. And so even what we say today might be very different in another month.
Yeah.
So I think it is just knowing how often that changes. And then the third one is what you've really been talking about, Brady, is just understanding what your own risk and your own risk tolerance is. No two businesses are really alike. If you have an organization that lends itself to having a different person show up for a gig or a shift or whatever that might be, what does that look like? Probably very different from what you were saying, all of us in an office who see, our coworkers every day. So I think it really is, what's your risk and your risk tolerance? How do you want to portray trust? Technology is going to change. And then, like you said too, just, pick a place to start. I think that's probably sometimes the hardest thing to do. But once you start, the other pieces often just fall into place.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Hey, we have time for a couple of questions here. We're going to do some Q&A. Feel free to submit now final questions. We have a couple of great ones in here that I'm excited to cover. Feel free to submit even as we're responding to these. But I really like this first one. I teased it out. This is the first question that came in, and I wish I had a silver bullet, but I think we have some good commentary, which is I think the hardest thing with implementing this is getting buy-in from leadership. It's getting budget, getting the okay, even when I have the data. So Karen, this person's saying, I'm sitting here, I can see the fraud, I can see the risk, I can see the trends, and now getting my company who's probably been used to just doing background checks for 10 years or 20 years, what do I do about that? So the question really is, how are you seeing ops people actually sell this to leadership? I'll start with this one real quickly, I think, Karen.
Yeah.
Our head of marketing said, don't sell, Brady, don't sell. And I'm not going to, but I actually think there's a big missing component right now that addresses this, which is this word that we're using a lot, accessibility. I think historically, when you've wanted to fight fraud, when you've wanted to rescreen, when you've wanted to address risk, the cost involved, the time involved, the people power involved, it's a tough equation. So when you're doing this cost risk trade-off, some people have had a tendency to want to play the game of chicken. The easiest answer for this is, well, once you have an incident, you have a story, and then suddenly your leadership team listens. It sounds silly. It's like an anecdote, but you use those stories. They are important. Like you maybe got away with that one, but maybe it's not the next time. So I think the data is important. Helping people understand the reality of it is very important. I think stories do help do that. But then also I think picking partners who are building the right technology and believing in making these things accessible. We believe in a world where you're going to fight all of this at a similar cost point to doing background checks. That is what I would like the world to go to, and what really we believe about it is that we are going to have to go fight these things without just more budget, more time, more people. So that's really important is picking the right partner. But I think it is a combination of data, it's storytelling and making it real. For your teams, that's a lot of the customers that are saying yes to this. They've had incidents, they have stories, they know they want to do something about it, and then they're finding a way to make it accessible. Karen, I'd love if you have any commentary additionally on that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that accessibility piece is a huge part of it. And I think, this should be an investment, not an expense. And unfortunately, operations teams are often viewed as expenses, but really trying to make sure you have the trust and the pieces in place to help prevent risk in your business. It's a lot like insurance in that respect. You do it because you are protecting yourself, you're protecting your customers. So I think that is also a piece of it, is to try to flip the script a little bit to be more of an investment that does pay off. Because, like you said, Brady, an incident that plays out in the news or a court case or whatever that may be is guaranteed to be a lot more expensive than any of this. But I think, we have heard a lot of our customers and prospects talk about, I would love to do it, but I can't afford it. So
Mhm.
to your point, we are really taking a look at how you change within the industry to say, no, we believe so strongly that every customer should be doing this. How do we make it more accessible for them to do? And then really that third piece is, something that you touched on earlier. You don't have to think about your entire workforce on day one. What are points in time that happen in your worker life cycle? And you could just start there. Start there, see what happens, and then ideally expand from there as well, too, so that you have the full coverage.
Yeah, that's great. So there's a few more questions in here, but we're down to our last couple minutes, so I'm going to kind of combine them into one because thematically they're similar, which is people are trying to figure out how do I creatively implement these things? How do I figure out this equation when I believe something about it? So there's a few questions here, but the one that I'm going to hone in on is what do background checks, what part do they play in the rise of fraud? And there's kind of another one about like customers having budget allocated to background checks, allocated to IDV, allocated in all these different places. Well, what becomes of the background check? And how do I think now about those things together? I have some pretty strong opinions on this one. I am curious what you would say, Karen, to that. If someone's trying to think like, well, do I rob Peter to pay Paul in my trust and safety program a little bit? How do I actually think about this?
First of all, I would say this will not replace your background check. Your background check is still a very important part of hiring or even that ongoing trust. It really is, how do you augment it? I think another point is, and again, I wasn't told don't sell, so I can probably say this. The fact of how Yardstick approaches sequential processing, I think, is another just important piece as well too, because you can stage your things, especially in a kind of a hire or a pre-hire motion, so that you're not having to pay for so many things all at once. You do your least expensive check up front, and if someone doesn't pass, you're done. You don't have to pay. So I think there are definitely ways to structure a program to make it the most cost efficient for budgets as well, too.
Stole the words out of my mouth. I think with all these questions, it's some sort of work smarter, not harder theory here where, yeah, don't not do the background check. Like if you're going to place somebody into a job, you still want to have done that, but don't background check on data you don't know is real or not. We see as much as 7% of the data that gets processed through our platform as bad data, bad social security number, falsified information. that's a lot. I mean, if you're looking at six-figure background checks budgets and you take 7% of that, that's a lot of money right there. So I'd say it's a little bit of a work smarter, not harder. Don't run them on bad data. Like Karen said, don't run the background check on somebody who would have never passed the MVR. And so it's kind of narrowing in, or perhaps it's you have a risk tolerance where I can run identity verification, and as long as I know the person is who they say they are, all the way up to the time they take their first shift, that's when I'm going to do the background check. So we have people who are making intelligent decisions on how do I sequence these things? How do I make sure I'm not running on bad data? How do I run the background check at the right time? And I think there actually are really, really creative ways to go pay for things like identity verification, upping your fraud armor, and upping your rescreen and ongoing monitoring armor while taking wasteful spend out of the background check equation. Like we do see that there's wasteful spend that goes in the background check. So I would say the background check's perhaps never been more important, but it also has maybe never been less important on its own. And so that's maybe the takeaway is not a demerit from the background check, but that you got to build around it and don't waste money on them. Great questions in here. Really appreciate all of your time. Thanks, Karen, for all of your insights directly with our customers. And at Yardstik, we're just really excited to be hearing this. And Karen, I can't wait to do another one of these in 3 years and watch this one and think, wow, the world was way different. Look how silly we sounded. I'm guessing it's going to change quickly, and we're excited to partner with you guys for that. So thank you so much for your time here today. From us at Yardstick, Brady and Karen, thank you very much. Have a nice
Thanks,
day.
everyone.